Hi everyone, this is Avita Duffy here at the Federalist, and like many Zoomers, this is going to be my first time voting in a presidential election. Zoomers, or Generation Z, are those 13 to 21 years old, and they're going to be about 1/10 of eligible voters today. Leftists have been pretty confident that Gen Z are going to be reliable Democrat voters like the millennials. However, recent studies and polls have found that Gen Z is far more fiscally conservative than millennials. They actually are the most entrepreneurial generation to date, and an incredible 54% of Gen Zers want to start their own business when they get older. They also are very financially cautious. They grew up during the Great Recession, and they watched many of their parents and older siblings suffer under crippling college debt, and so many of them are either foregoing college or waiting and deferring until they're older. That's significant because we can contribute a lot of the socialist movement and the feel the burn wave to indoctrination in American universities. And so if Gen Zers are either not going to college or deferring until they're older and presumably wiser, elitist leftists won't have the same kind of influence on Gen Z as they did on millennials. Now, leftists, despite this, still feel pretty confident in Gen Z because they tend to be very socially liberal. A new Pew Research poll confirmed that Gen Z is very social liberal and on par with the millennials, and actually they end up polling at very similar levels. Sometimes, in a few cases, slightly less social liberal than millennials, but in general pretty similar. But that's significant because from the silent era generation until the millennials, we've seen the trend toward progressivism grow in large margins. Now, from millennials to Gen Z, this is the first time that we're seeing progressivism at a standstill. They're at a pause. So let's take, for example, NFL protests. Disapproval of NFL protests is at 63% for the silent generation, and with each generation, it becomes less and less of a disapproval. And so the greatest difference being between Gen X and millennials, with a 17-point difference. However, when you look at millennials to Gen Z, 2% more of Gen Zers actually disapprove of the NFL protests compared to millennials. A lot of what I contribute this pause in progressivism to is the fact that a lot of conservatives have far more kids than liberals, and we're finally seeing the effects of that with Gen Z. But we cannot talk about parents without addressing Gen Z's other mother, and that is big tech. A horrifying 59% of Gen Zers cite big tech and social media as their main source of news. For example, this election cycle, we've seen that big tech has had a very leftist tinge to it, leftist slant. And so, we've seen everything from the suppression of the Hunter Biden scandal and your very own The Federalist, and also in other areas too that you might not even be aware of other than Twitter and Facebook, like Snapchat. And Snapchat only allows for leftist editorials to give these little short-minute rundowns on current event for Snapchat users. And so kids and users on Snapchat are only getting news from CNN and Now This and NBC. And so that's obviously going to have a big effect on their worldview and their perspective. So this is a big deal. Big tech is a big problem. And if Republicans don't want to lose Gen Z to the Silicon Valley oligarchs, something needs to be done, either with competition or regulatory or legislative reform. But we cannot let this slide, because if you don't, we will lose Gen Z in the future. And the data shows that they aren't millennials and that there is hope for them, but only if action is taken. So watch how they vote today, and tomorrow take action, because it is America's future and it is important.